I ignored my mother's last call. And the worst part? It wasn't by accident or distraction or any real lack of time. I watched the phone vibrating on the table, saw her name flashing on the screen, and still chose not to answer. In that moment, it felt like just another call I could return later. After all, I was busy. I always was. There was always something more urgent, more important, more decisive happening. At least that's what I kept telling myself, as if repeating it enough times could turn a selfish choice into an unavoidable necessity. That Tuesday, nothing seemed different. I was sitting in front of my computer, surrounded by goals, deadlines, piled-up messages, and that constant feeling that if I slowed down for even a second, everything might fall apart. I had spent years chasing that life, building something I believed was success. And in a way, I pulled it off. Money coming in, recognition, stability, things that once seemed impossible. Except that while my life was growing on the outside, it was shrinking on the inside, and I chose not to see that. I left home at 19 with a firm promise in my head. I would come back different, come back better, come back someone everyone would be proud of. My mother stood at the door that day, trying to hide her tears behind a smile that wasn't fooling anyone. She hugged me as if she already knew that moment wasn't just a goodbye. It was the beginning of a distance that might never be fully closed again. Before I got in the car, she said something simple, almost casual, but that today weighs more than any decision I've ever made. Just don't forget about us. And I didn't forget, at least not at first. I called every week, shared the news, asked how things were going. Then, over time, the calls started fading. They became bi-weekly, then monthly, then tied to specific occasions. Birthdays, holidays, those quick calls where you fake closeness in a few minutes. There was always a ready excuse in my head. Too much work, exhaustion, responsibility, pressure. And she always answered the same way, with a calm I now understand differently. "It's okay, son. I understand." But she didn't understand. She just accepted it, because loving someone sometimes means learning to make do with crumbs without complaining. The years went by too fast, the way they do when you're busy trying to prove something to the world. I achieved things that on paper meant victory. A better apartment, a new car, a packed routine, a schedule that left almost no room for anything. I felt important, needed, productive. But at the same time, there was a strange silence whenever everything stopped. A void I avoided facing, filling every free moment with more work, more distraction, more excuses. My family began disappearing from my life, little by little, without making a sound. My father stopped reaching out. My sisters stopped insisting. And my mother, she kept trying. She called at predictable times, as if she still believed that at some point I would answer. And I always found a reason not to pick up right then. "I'll call back later. I'll talk to her later. Later, later, later." Until the day came when there was no later left. I watched the phone ring. I actually watched it. It wasn't a missed moment. It wasn't coincidence. I looked at it, recognized the name, thought for a second, and let it ring until it stopped. Because in my head, it wasn't urgent. It could wait. It always could. Minutes later, a message from my sister appeared. Short, direct, different. "Can you call me? It's urgent." I almost ignored that, too. Part of me assumed it was just another common problem, another situation I didn't have time to deal with. But something unsettled me. A strange discomfort, a feeling that something was off. I called. And in that instant, everything changed. Her voice was broken, cracking, lost somewhere between sobs. It only took me a few seconds to understand what was happening, but those seconds felt far too long. My mother had collapsed, suddenly, without warning. Hospital, emergency, critical. The world made no sound when it fell apart. It just went quiet. The drive back was silent, but inside me, everything was screaming. For the first time in years, there was no meeting, no deadline, nothing more important than getting there in time. And for the first time, I understood how much I had been putting off something that should never have been delayed at all. When I arrived, my sister looked at me in a way I will never forget. It wasn't anger, it was something worse. It was confirmation that I hadn't been there when I should have been. "She asked for you," she said, with a calm that hurt more than any scream ever could, until the very last moment. I walked into the room already knowing I was too late, not by minutes, by years. My mother was there, but she was no longer. The silence in that place was too heavy, too final. I held her hand, trying to find some trace of what could still be said, but there was no time left. The words I never spoke stayed trapped inside me, with nowhere to go. And in that moment, everything lost its meaning. The money I made, the achievements I celebrated, the recognition I chased, none of it had any value there. None of it could give me one more call, one more conversation, one more chance to do things differently. I tried to remember the last time we really talked. I couldn't. I tried to remember the last time I told her I loved her. I couldn't do that either. And that's when I finally understood the real price of my choices. I spent years building a life that looked perfect from the outside, while quietly destroying everything that actually mattered. I traded presence for productivity, affection for ambition, time for money. And in the end, I was left without the thing that was worth the most. Today, the phone barely rings. And sometimes I still look at the screen, waiting to see her name appear again, as if by some miracle I could answer this time. But it doesn't appear, and it never will again. If you can still pick up, pick up. If you can still go back, go back. Because there comes a moment when later stops existing. And when that moment arrives, you realize that no achievement in the world can pay the price of one ignored call.